American General Dwight Eisenhower was not a typical field commander leading troops personally into the attack. His genius lay elsewhere. He won battles in headquarters, on paper, and at negotiation tables. His greatest achievement was Operation Overlord, the Normandy landings, which required logistical efforts unparalleled in history. Eisenhower took on the management of the most complex military coalition, forcing the armies of the US, Great Britain, Canada, and the French resistance to work as a single, perfectly tuned mechanism. The scale of D-Day continues to boggle the mind. On June 6, 1944, under Eisenhower's command, 156,000 soldiers landed on the coast of France. To deliver them to their destination, an armada of 6,939 vessels was assembled, from giant battleships to tiny landing craft. This remains the largest fleet ever assembled by humanity for a single operation. From the air, this steel fist was covered by 11,590 aircraft, flying over 14,000 combat sorties in just one day. An interesting fact, the level of preparation was so detailed that for the needs of the invasion alone, the Allies printed over 17 million maps. And to provide the advancing troops with fuel, Eisenhower's engineers implemented Project Pluto, pipelines under the ocean, laying a pipeline directly along the bottom of the English Channel. At the same time, Eisenhower perfectly understood all the risks. On the eve of the landing, he wrote a secret letter and tucked it into his wallet, in which he took full and sole responsibility in advance in the event of the operation's failure. By the end of the war, his organizational talent allowed him to successfully command an Allied troop grouping in Europe numbering an incredible 4.5 million men. If Eisenhower was the architect of the coalition, British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery was a proponent of methodical, mathematically calculated warfare. He openly hated risk and improvisation. His strategy was to create a crushing hammer. Montgomery only entered a decisive battle when he was absolutely certain that the numbers, equipment, and supplies vastly exceeded the enemy's capabilities. He sought to fight with metal, not human lives, trying to minimize casualties among his soldiers. This philosophy worked perfectly in the Battle of El Alamein in North Africa in the autumn of 1942. Against the legendary German General Erwin Rommel, Montgomery amassed 195,000 soldiers compared to the Axis powers' 116,000. But the main superiority was technical. The British fielded 1,029 tanks, including the latest American Shermans, against the enemy's 547 tanks, half of which were obsolete Italian machines that the Germans ironically called cardboard boxes. The preparation for the offensive was terrifying. Montgomery's 892 guns unleashed an unprecedented artillery barrage, firing over 1 million shells at enemy positions. An interesting detail, Montgomery was so confident in his mathematical calculations and attack plan that on the night the grandiose offensive began, he calmly went to sleep and ordered his staff officers not to wake him until morning, unless a catastrophe occurred. His plan worked flawlessly. The victory at El Alamein forever deprived Hitler of hopes of capturing the Suez Canal and Middle Eastern oil. On the Eastern Front, the scale of combat operations overshadowed everything happening in the West. Here, Joseph Stalin, as Supreme Commander-in-Chief, directed not just operations, but an entire state completely shifted onto the tracks of a total war for survival. The strategy of the USSR ultimately came down to a colossal war of attrition, in which Nazi Germany mathematically had no chance of winning. The apogee of Soviet military art was the offensive Operation Bagration in the summer of 1944. The numbers behind this offensive make one shudder. Stalin and his general staff threw 2.3 million soldiers into battle against the 800,000-strong German Army Group Center. It was a true symphony of steel. The offensive was supported by 5,200 tanks and self-propelled guns, as well as 32,000 artillery pieces and mortars. An interesting fact, to hide the preparation of an army of such gigantic size, the Soviet command employed unprecedented camouflage measures. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers and thousands of units of armored vehicles moved exclusively at night. and strict radio silence was observed on the airwaves. Until the very last moment, the Germans did not guess the direction of the main blow. As a result, in just 2 months, Army Group Center was completely destroyed. 28 Wehrmacht divisions ceased to exist. This became the largest military defeat of Germany in its entire history. Success at the front would have been impossible without an industrial miracle in the rear. Despite the loss of crucial industrial territories in 1941, the Soviet economy under strict leadership produced over 100,000 tanks and self-propelled guns, and over 130,000 combat aircraft during the war years. This was the grinding down of the enemy war machine through inexhaustible human reserves, and an uninterrupted conveyor belt of the military industry working beyond the Ural Mountains. These 3 figures approached victory from completely different angles. Eisenhower united the world and logistics. Montgomery proved that the German army could be broken by mathematical calculation and a storm of fire. And Stalin unleashed upon Nazism an absolute, overwhelming mass of men and steel in the largest land confrontation in the planet's history.